Hey guys, we're gonna talk about how to do a piecewise linear function. So there's two key parts to doing a piecewise function. And kind of like how the title says piece, basically what you're doing is you're doing pieces of certain graphs, and you're only graphing that part. So a couple things you won't see. Generally, you might, in most cases, you might have no arrows. Okay, so like when I graph these ones over here, when I look at those table values, I'm not going to put any arrows in the end because the starting number and the stopping number are the start and the stop. Now, this column here, the equations, those I'm going to put in y equals. But these intervals represent the table values that I'm going to be graphing. So, what I'm going to do for the first one, I'm going to go to x minus 3, type that in my calculator, and then I'm going to go to the table. And it says in the table they want me to do from -3, including -3, up to 0, but not including 0. So I'm going to go to -3, and I have -6. -2 I have -5, and then -1 I got -4. Now 0, because there's no equal, this 0 is not included in my table. The 0 that's going to be included is the one in the second function. So if you don't have that equals, that number is not going to be part of it. And I'll show you how to show that in the graph in a minute. I'm going to go back to my y equals and clear that out. I'm going to type in my new function, which is 1/2 x plus 4. So I'm going to hit second graph. I'm going to start at 0. So I got 0, 4. We have 1, and then we have 9/2 fraction. 2 and 5. 3, we have 11/2. And then for 4, I'm assuming we're going to have 6 based on the change. Now, these 9/2 and 11/2, those are 4.5 and 5.5. If you were confused about that. So we're going to go ahead right now, we're going to graph these points. So I got -3, -6. -2, -5, -1, -4, and 0 in our first table was -3, but that one's not included. So I'm going to leave an open circle at that point, because that's actually not part of our answer. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the second equation. So I got 0, 4 to start, which is there. And I'm going to skip the decimal one. I'm going to go to 2 and 5. And then we got 3 and 6. So that's the top part of my graph right there. Now, as far as the rest of the question goes, they want us to state the range of f. So in this case, our range is going to be dependent on which values we have on the y-axis. So there's two parts to this range. I have from -6 to -3. So it includes -6, but it doesn't include -3. And I have from 4 to 6. And both of those, the 4 and the 6, are included. So again, I'm just taking a piece of each of the graphs, and I'm using the interval to tell me which values in the table to use. Now I'm going to go ahead and erase this. We're going to go on to the second one. And what they want us to do with 2, like it says that we should not only be able to graph it, but we should be able to write their equation. So I have 3 parts to this. Now they want me to call the function f of x. So I'm going to start first with my domain values. Now, for the domain, for the first part of the line goes from there to there, which is, in this case, -8 to -2. Now for the second part, goes from -2 to 3. And the third part of the line goes from 3 to 6. And again, I'm getting these numbers from the places where the points start and stop for each section. Now, the next part, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and write the equation out. So I want to think about a couple things. The first thing I want to think about is if I was to extend the line, because I need a y-intercept, where would my next point be? And if I extend this line out, it's going to hit up here, which would mean my y-intercept would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then my slope, if I take 2 points on my graph, here and here, looks like I have to go up 3 and over 2. So the first part of the graph is going to be 3/2 x for the slope, plus 7. Now the second part is a horizontal line, and it goes through the y-axis at the number 4. So the second part of this part of the graph, is going to be the horizontal line y equaled 4. And then for the last part, again, if I draw it out, it looks like first, if I find some of the points on there, I can kind of finish this. So I'm going to actually add a couple points in, because it looks like I have to go 2 up. So here is what the line would kind of look like. And it looks like that it's going down 2 and over 1. So that'd be my slope, which is -2 x. And then I drew the line out to hit the y-axis, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the third part is going to be based on this equation, but again, it only goes from 3 to 6. So those are the 3 parts of the equation. And again, the easiest way to do this would be to go ahead and start by doing the domain values, do this first, and then go through each of the other parts and figure out the slope and the y-intercept. Now, the last one we're going to look at is exercise 3. We're going to skip over exercise 4. And in the case of this question, I'll move this up just a little bit so we can get the whole thing in. Now I got g of x, and it says 5 minus x when x is less than 2. So I'm going to go back to y equals. I'm going to put 5 minus x in. And it says I got to do x when it's less than 2. It doesn't include 2, but I'm going to include that in my table. And I'm going to do a few of the points, so I'll do -2 to 2. So, let me put my table in here. So we got for this one, 5 minus x, we got -2, 7, -1, 6, 0, 5, 1, 4, and 2, 3. So, and again, this one's going to keep going. And then for the second one, my 1/2 x plus 2, that one includes 2. So I'm going to clear this out. And I'll do my 1/2 x plus 2. Now for the second one, we'll do that one red. So we got 2, 3, 3, and then we have 7 over 2, 4, 4, and I'll do the next couple points. So we got 5, 9 over 2, and then 6, 5. So, I'm going to go ahead and start graphing these. And like I said, this point's not included, but that point is where we're going to have we should have our open circle. Okay. Then we got 1, 4. So I'm going to kind of draw that out from there. And that one's going to have an arrow because it just says less than 2, so it's going to keep going. Now for the other part, we do have that same point. We do have that 2, 3. This one was included, so I'm going to put that in. So that point is going to be filled in. And then we got 3 and 3.5, 4, 4. and 5, 9 over 2, and then 6, 5. So this is going to look like this. So that's kind of what the graph is going to look like. And that says for A, determine the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept is going to be for this one, it's going to be 5. And again, that's our y-intercept. And why couldn't a function only have one y-intercept? Well, again, there's only going to be one answer for every input value. So we talked about that before. Now they want us to find the x-intercept. And again, that would be when y equals 0. So if I put in, I set each of these equal to 0, and I solve for it. So if I subtract 5 on both sides, I get negative x equals negative 5, and divide by negative 1, I'm going to get x is 5. So for the first equation, x is 5 is the x-intercept. And then for the second one, I'm going to just multiply everything by 2. So then I have x plus 4 equals 0. Then subtract 4 on each side, and I'm going to get x is negative 4. So the second one says we have a 0 at negative 4. Now, here's the thing, though. If you look at the graph, there's no zeros. So for part D, it talks about why does the graph contradict the answers we found? Well, again, this is because of those intervals. So we got the inequality of x is less than 2 and x is greater than or equal to 2. And in each of those, we don't get that far on that equation. So those x values, or in this case those zeros, are not part of our domain. We only use specific numbers. And that kind of leads us into part E, kind of the same thing. Again, there are zeros, but that would be a 0 if we could graph the whole entire line. So, a couple of the key points. Just remember, when you're doing a piecewise function, these inequalities and intervals represent the table values. Okay? Those are the table values. You do not graph, my pen's getting messed up here, but do not graph those. They can't be graphed on the calculator. And also, just make sure that, and look out for that equal to part, because if you don't have that equal to part, then you're going to have that open circle. You see a less than or greater than sign, you're going to have an open circle at that point on that graph. Okay. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in class.